Welcome back to our executive functioning workshop. Today we're diving into working memory. This skill is like a mental sticky note. It allows you to temporarily hold on to and work with information as you complete tasks. The agenda for today will introduce what working memory is. We'll talk about chunking, what it is, how it works, why it helps, and then we'll review and apply the knowledge that we've gathered. By the end of today, you'll learn how to enhance your working memory using a strategy called chunking. This is going to help you remember more information and improve your overall performance. So let's start first by defining working memory. Working memory is the small amount of information that you can hold on to in your mind while you're doing something else. So think of it as like a post-it note on your mental desk. It's temporary, helping you keep track of important information. Um, it's also like a mental whiteboard, so you can write on it and erase it as needed, but space obviously is limited. Um, Working memory is also like a mental rehearsal space, like a rehearsal room. It's where your brain practices and manipulates new information before it's stored or used. So, one way we're going to try to effectively utilize our working memory is by doing something called chunking. Chunking is grouping individual pieces of information into larger, meaningful units. So, why does this work? Well, our brain can process smaller groups of information better than a long list of like separate details. For example, a phone number like 471-113-324, that's easier to remember when it's chunked into groups of 3. Look at that. Like that's obviously a little bit more complicated to remember rather than if it was broken down into 3 separate sections. So here's a scenario where chunking might work. Okay, let's say you have a biology quiz on 15 vocabulary terms. Looking at that long list might feel overwhelming at first. However, we can chunk these. So we do that by breaking the words into smaller, related groups. Sometimes you'll just split these into 3 groups, but with things like biology, very often they're already kind of categorized, and that's a better way to study this. So group A might be cell structures. Group B or group 2 might be cellular processes. And then group 3 might be types of cells. And then we would label those terms in those sections. If I was studying these, I would focus on mastering one group at a time before moving on to the next. Chunking like this makes information easier to organize and recall. Here's also like why it works. It increases your working memory capacity. Everybody has a capacity for working memory. This can increase that by working through chunking. It also, like I said, improves your recall. So it provides meaning to those groups that makes it easier to remember. So when you're studying, if you're chunking terms or chunking information into meaningful groups or meaningful sections, that's going to make it easier to remember. It also enhances your learning, it enhances your studying. Chunking allows you to understand how ideas connect. You'll make those connections through this process rather than just having a bunch of notes scattered about. And then lastly, it supports your cognitive efficiency. Your brain works smarter when it's chunking, not harder. How would we make this work? It's similar to how you worked with that SMART goal. You would set time limits. I would argue that studying for 25 to 30 minutes at max would be the best. You need to use active recall, so you should test yourself on the chunks instead of just all at once or instead of just reading it all. Lastly, I would actually suggest mixing up the subjects. So if you switch between studying for biology and for history, you're going to keep your brain fresh and it can also improve retention. Um, Here's what you're going to do today. I want you to think of something you need to study or complete this week, whether that's a test, a project, or homework, and then I want you to break it down into small parts. For instance, if you have a history project, your steps might be researching the topic, finding good sources, writing an outline, drafting the introduction. And then I want you to group these steps by chunking. So similar steps together, label each group: research, writing, editing, and then set mini goals. Decide which group you're going to work on today and when you'll complete it. By the end of the session, reflect, share with someone how that worked, made it more or less manageable. Today we focused on task chunking and how that can help us increase our working memory and utilize our sources. Um, Stay tuned for next week when we talk about some other aspect of executive functioning. Good luck this week.